At various points throughout the gospel, when Jesus is at the height of his conflict between the Jewish leaders and himself, or various factions of the Jewish people who just simply oppose him, Jesus demonstrates a particular knowledge of his faith, a working knowledge of his faith as one raised in the Jewish faith and tradition. And this is especially so when they accuse Jesus of blasphemy or violations of the law and the prophets. He'll work his way through those conflicts by demonstrating his own knowledge of the faith that surpasses their interpretation of it. We see that also in the Acts of the Apostles, as the apostles, with their personal knowledge of Jesus and their knowledge of the law and the prophets, especially in the case of St. Paul, are able to evangelize and also overcome conflict and controversy because of that working knowledge they have of their faith. We see that also throughout the Church's history, with its early Christian writers to some of its great teachers and stalwart defenders of the faith. We too are called to have a working knowledge of that faith, and that's not always the case. For many people, sometimes for a couple of generations, much of what they know has been just a list of do's and don'ts, or standards that people either don't like or don't agree with. People will often say, well, my parents taught me this, or they'll say, the nuns taught me this in school. But they'll have very little working knowledge of the faith that they profess. A lot of it is reduced to what they like and what they don't like, or what's meaningful to them or what's not meaningful to them. Today people will often say, well, this is what the church teaches, but I believe this as opposed to something else. Or simply, I agree with it, or I don't agree with it. I'm Catholic, but I don't agree with this teaching. And our faith is certainly much, much more than simply things that we like or don't like, or are meaningful or not meaningful, or things that we believe or don't believe, especially when we're dealing with universal truths. And especially our faith is much, much more than simply what we agree with, as opposed to what we don't agree with. And we're all called to have a working knowledge and a growing knowledge of that faith. And as we come to the end of the season of Lent, and where we're going to be putting aside the individual sacrifices we engaged in, the disciplines we do, and the communal observances that we have, it might be a good thing to do as we look toward our post-Lenten year, especially during the season of Easter, that we resolve in one way or another to perhaps grow in the knowledge of our faith, whether it's church teaching, and perhaps is the most important area to really grow in, is the teachings of the church. But we have church history, church law, we have church art and music throughout that history. And perhaps one thing we would resolve, say, during the season of Easter, is to read a section of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, in which is put forth the teachings of the Church, along with the background and the substance from church history, from the scriptures, from the councils that our Church has conducted over the years, or the early writings of the saints and other fathers and doctors of the Church, other teachers of our faith. On the one hand, we hear people say, I believe in the Bible, not in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But if you actually look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we'll see in its footnotes and its references just how substantially rooted in Scripture and in church teaching, since before the Bible had been formulated in the 4th century, the teachings of the Church really are. And they are rooted in that tradition of the church and its teachings. And it's been applied all throughout history to various circumstances, even down to today, so that the teachings of the church and the faith that we profess is just as much a thing of substance and reality as it has always been. But we are called to have a growing knowledge of it, so that we can, when necessary, defend that faith, but especially and more importantly, so that we can teach that faith to our children, to our students, and pass that faith on from one generation to the next, not just as a list of do's and don'ts, but as a truly substantial faith that we profess, rooted in our faith in Jesus Christ, who himself had a substantial working knowledge of the Jewish faith he was raised in, and the same faith that the apostles and early teachers of the faith were rooted in. So let us resolve, as we prepare to enter into the Easter season, that perhaps during the Easter season we will find some area of our faith to truly grow in that working knowledge of, whether it be church history, church teaching, reading a section of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, reading one of the documents of the Second Vatican Council, which still continues to cause such discussion, in some cases controversy. How many even know that there's a document from Vatican II on the apostle of the laity? Those who are laity might consider reading that particular document of the Vatican Council. But there's such a treasure trove of the teachings of the church and ways we can grow and learn in them, from reading some of the writings of the fathers of the church, reading one of the books of scriptures and truly diving into it through the footnotes or other resources to study it more deeply. Let us resolve that in the coming year, in the post-Lenten seasons of our church's year, we will resolve to grow in our knowledge of that faith we profess, so that we can, in a meaningful and substantial way, defend that faith when necessary, but especially pass that faith on to our children and our students of the next generation.